Welcome everyone, welcome, and thank you for joining me for these occasional opinion videos I plan to be doing every now and then. While I play through some random game, today I'll be playing through Zelda 2 on my Wii U, and I cannot tell you how much I'm really enjoying it. I genuinely like Zelda 2 a lot. I think it's a good game, and I know why it gets so much hate, but since I'm not even really a member of the Zelda camp, you know, I've always been more of a Final Fantasy guy, surprise, surprise. I've always been a big RPG platformer guy, but this one feels more up my alley for the old school Zeldas. I might even make a video about it sometime. But on the subject of reading, I love reading, and in no way was this always the case, you know. Video games, that's been a constant love of my life, but reading, I didn't really get into it until my early 20s. Honestly, for most of my life, I was never much of a reader at all unless you counted the works of Stan Lee, Beverly Cleary, or R.L. Stine. I did actually read Stephen King's It once when I was in middle school, and I'm going to devote a whole video to that sometime. But my stories were RPG stories, and I love them very much. And if you don't believe me, go watch JMB on RPGs video series, knock yourself out. But anyways, around college, something happened to me. Final Fantasy 1 wasn't going to be a story-driven game, really. Final Fantasy 11 was going to be some kind of an online game where you played with other people around the world, which did not appeal to me in the least or make any sense to me at all. I had no idea that this was the direction where gaming was going. It honestly seemed silly to me at the time. I mean, why? I thought. Why would I want to play a game with other people? I thought I played games to get away from other people, to be by myself. It seemed totally ass backwards to me. But of course, joke's on me, all of you wonderful WoW fans out there. Joke's on me because as we know, this is the world of gaming. So let's all play together and yet never actually be together. Hooray! Anyways, no more story-driven fantasies meant that I had just run out of fantasy stories to experience. And as it turned out, fantasy stories were really important to me. You know, you don't love something until it's gone. Final Fantasy XI was like, no! More! Stick that heroin in my arm, please! So I had to make a very tough decision. I had to switch to reading. Like any other junkie, I needed my fix, and finally, begrudgingly, I decided to start reading books. Because I figured, though Lord knows they're a pain in the ass to read, and at least you don't have to grind all the time to get through the story, you know? They're just pure story when you think about it. I first read Vampire Hunter D and totally loved it, and then I read a bunch of Dark Tower books that totally sucked. And don't get me wrong here, I love Stephen King. I think he's the best, and Stephen King's It is one of my most absolute favorites of all time. But those Dark Tower books? What a shit sandwich! They suck! They were so bad, in fact, I'm not kidding here. I literally once threw one of them out the window and said to myself, God damn! This was back in college. What the fuck? I could write better than this shit! And 11 years later, here I am. Perhaps getting published for ever blaspheming Stephen King in the first place. Forgive me, oh King, please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. The Shining and Stranger Things is amazing. Come on. But hey, that's the way she goes. Anyways, but then later on, once I finally got my hands on Fountainhead and read that one cover to cover, that was it for me. Books were the new thing. Books were the cat's ass. Books, both fiction and non-fiction, are now some of the true loves of my life. And if you are listening to this, I would like you to love them too, because I think books are magic. They are literally frickin' magic, and if you don't believe me, just go pick one up. Pick up a book and open it and gaze upon the symbols inside, and almost instantly, before you know it, images are gonna start magically popping in your head. An entire universe is just gonna pop right there, right between your ears. It's remarkable. How is that not magic? Especially when you consider that books not only have the power to put a whole universe between your ears, they have an even greater power to change the very universe you already live in. Your entire perceived universe as you know it. Every day, every time you sit down and pop open a book. When you read a book, you are going to see something. You are going to feel something. Something magical. Because you are a human being. And that means you have passion, you have imagination, you have hunger, you have a soul. If you ask me, a soul is nothing more than your passion and your imagination and your ambition combined. So therefore, if you have none of these things, I hate to tell you, but you got no soul, brother. And either way, Worry not, because one of the most accessible ways each and every one of us has to exercise and strengthen our imaginations, our passions, our souls is by reading. So please consider reading more. I mean, it really is tantamount to your imagination, your passion, your everything. Your soul needs exercise and stimulus and nourishment, same as your body and your mind. And I'm sorry, but I really do think that on their own, manga, comics, anime, movies, video games, they're all great. I'm a huge advocate of all of them. But they will only get you so far, especially if you want to personally create any of the things I've just previously mentioned to you. Video games, comics, and anime, they're all the lube that keep the gears in my head spinning. That's for damn sure. But believe me when I say this, on their own, they're not going to strengthen your mental machines much. They alone will not provide your imagination with enough of what it needs to create, because there is very little left for your imagination to imagine and create in the first place when you experience those things. Personally, I can think of few things that are more important in our lives than our passions and our imaginations and our ambitions and our souls. I think technically you can be atheist and kind of believe in the essence of a soul. I don't know. If you're an atheist, by all means, give me your 2 cents. I think even Ayn Rand, who was an atheist, always talked about the human spirit. Anyways, I'm just rambling now. Anyways, I'd like to offer you some books that I think are pretty darn interesting. First a bunch of fiction, and then a bunch of factual books. Fiction, Stephen King's It, The Fountainhead, Pillars of the Earth, A Wrinkle in Time, Post Office, Rainbow Six, The Hobbit, Vampire Hunter D. Stephen King's It is probably the greatest piece of fiction I have ever experienced, next to Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood and Final Fantasy VII. It is amazing. It is the most haunting and amazing frickin' horror story you're ever gonna read. Next, The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. I'm just gonna read you this long quote from the main character, Howard Rourke, and just see what it jars in your head. And if it does jar something, it might be worth cruising through 700 pages of The Fountainhead. Throughout the centuries, there were men who took the first steps down the new roads, armed with nothing but their own vision. Their goals differed, but they all had this in common, that the step was first. The road was new. The vision unborrowed, and the response they received? Hatred. The great creators, the thinkers, the artists, the scientists, the inventors stood alone against the men of their time. Every great new thought was opposed. Every great new invention was denounced. The first motor was considered foolish. The airplane was considered impossible. The power loom was considered vicious. Anesthesia was considered sinful. But men of unborrowed vision went ahead. They fought, they suffered, and they paid, but they won. To sell your soul is the easiest thing in the world. That's what everybody does every hour of their life. If I asked you to keep your soul, would you understand why that's much harder? Howard Rourke laughed, and so should we all. Consider reading The Fountainhead. Pillars of the Earth. What a wonderful read this book was. This book truly warms the cockles of your heart and shows you the powers of faith. It is quite a tale. It truly gives you a wonderful bird's eye view of what life was like during the Dark Ages as you follow a town's journey and all of its residents, but especially the family of Tom Builder and the children of the Earl of Shiring across the generation, as they all struggle to create that which will be the shining center of their community, their own cathedral. It's a book that really shows why we should all be more thankful with the modern times we live in, and even more thankful that we have each other. Next, A Wrinkle in Time. Easily one of the most mind-blowing children's books of all time. Just give it a read. I'm going to make a video on it eventually. Hopefully this year. Next, Post Office by Charles Bukowski. Bukowski, the famous gambler, womanizer, and unapologetic drunk of the 1960s and 70s LA scene. You know that David Duchovny show, Californication? That was based on him. He's as funny as hell and he's as smart as they come. And he's most certainly worth a read. Plus his autobiography, Ham on Rhyme, is really cool too. Like, this is actually from his book, Women, where it's really funny. He wins all this money at the racetrack, but he's really drunk. And like, he and his girlfriend had a fight. So basically, and I'm paraphrasing, he calls her up and he's like, "Look, bitch, I just want all this fucking money, you hear me? You know why? Because I'm a goddamn winner, and that's something you'll never fucking understand, you goddamn whore." And then finally, the lady on the other line is like, Hank! She's like, "What? What is it?" "I'm just the babysitter." And of course, then he's like, fuck, and he hangs up. He's a character. He's a doozy, and he's actually, he might be my biggest inspiration as a writer, because that son of a bitch, he just kept going no matter what. I don't think he got his career successfully going till he was like freaking 48. So he's just like, damn, when I like said like, do not ever quit and all that on the epilogue videos, he's probably the best example I can think of that. He's awesome. Charles Bukowski is definitely worth listening to. Okay, next is Rainbow Six, which I would consider to be a neoconservative's wet dream. If you're neoliberal, don't let that dissuade you. Just shut up. Forget about politics for a sec. But there's plenty of good reason why this particular Tom Clancy novel has never been made into a Hollywood movie, nor will it ever. Because if I was gonna sum up Rainbow Six in one sentence, it would be this. Kill all the hippies! Kill them! Because in Rainbow Six, the hippies are actually the bad guys. In Rainbow Six, the liberal elite Greenpeace hippies are the ones trying to destroy the Earth. It's the hippies this time trying to ruin everything, and only the gun-toting conservative soldiers of Rainbow Six have the guts and the knowledge to stop them and put a bullet in their face. And if you think this book sounds like a spoof or something funny, it's not. It takes itself cancer seriously, and it's awesome. Tom Clancy is amazing. You read his books and you think he's like a 30-year CIA veteran, when in fact, nah, the dude was just like an insurance salesman or something. Fucking awesome. Hobbit. I think Hobbit is the best fantasy book ever written, so just fucking read it. It's the fucking Hobbit, man. Come on. I mean, that is the fantasy book. I think it's way better than the Lord of the Rings trilogy books. I find the Lord of the Rings trilogy pretty darn dry. Hobbit's awesome. Hobbit's a lot of fun. How'd they fuck up that movie? That movie sucked. The animated one, that's where it's at. That one's good. And finally, for fiction, Vampire Hunter D by Hideyuki Kikuchi. Sumimasen, Kikuchi-san. Omae no namae wa kantan de wa nai. I love this book. It's about fucking vampires, for God's sake. It was inspired by those old Christopher Hammer horror vampire films. It's like I have a speech impediment. Christ. It inspired 2 anime films. The book, not my speech impediment. And my money is on that it most certainly inspired Castlevania in some way. So if you like Castlevania or Hammer horror films, get your hands on Vampire Hunter D, the novel. It's awesome. The great anime movies, too. Okay, now, wrapping it all up. For nonfiction, we got 98.6 Degrees, The Art of Keeping Your Ass Alive by Mr. Cody Lundeen. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. 33 Strategies of War by Uncle Bobby Green. Uncle Bobby Green. And Mastery, also by Uncle Bobby Green. Oh yeah, and finally, Your Best Life Now by Joel Osteen. And trust me, I don't think you have to be religious at all to get something out of this book. Because personally, in no way do I consider myself a Christian or a member of any faith of any kind whatsoever, other than what I personally just make up as I go along. I often tend to think of spirituality like finger painting. I really don't think there's any right or wrong way to do it, just so long as you're not killing people or blowing people up. I even think of church, honestly, as the same as going to a Renaissance fair. It's fun to see how people used to live a couple hundred years ago, but why the heck would you go more than once or twice a year, if that? Plus also, it's like, you've been to one Renaissance fair, you've been to them all, right? Okay. But in light of all this, I'm telling you, if you can just learn to be a little creative when you read it, like whenever he says Jesus or God, which is a lot, just replace it, I don't know, with yourself or something. So like when he says shit like, you gotta believe in Jesus, you gotta believe in yourself, you gotta put your faith in God, you gotta put your faith in yourself. And I mean, we could really give this huge existential argument that God is the universe and we are all part of the universe, therefore we are all God. And everything is awesome, and you are the special, and I am the special, and I don't know, Merry fucking Christmas, but you know what I mean? It's just, I don't know, it's all a really big, complicated mess, and maybe that's why we try to simplify it all as just a man in a row, because that's something we can comprehend. I mean, you can't even comprehend the size of Texas, let alone the universe, you know, this is some big shit. So I think, anyways, if you just try and block all that stuff out and just simplify it and read his book, and you've gotta believe in yourself. You've gotta have faith in yourself. Technically, if you are part of the universe, a part of God and all that stuff, anyways, it's not exactly wrong either, you know. If this makes you scratch your head or go, huh, a little, well, it makes me scratch my head and go, huh, all the time. But give this book a read, and I would love to hear your thoughts on that one. And finally, Tao of Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee, which will teach you not just Bruce Lee's entire philosophy behind fighting, but his entire philosophy behind everything. Be like the nature of water. Water is the softest shit in the world, and yet it can also penetrate something as hard as rock. Hey? So these are the books I recommended. Wow, if you listened to me this whole time, good for you. Thank you. For anybody still listening, if any of you want to list some books that have been very important to you in your life, I'd love to hear and the reason why. Or if some of you have actually had some experiences with the books I've already listed, tell me about them. Tell me about what you think of the books I've mentioned. I'd love to hear. I'm Justin M. Bailey, and I'm looking forward to doing these little opinion pieces every now and then. I hope you enjoy them. Thank you. Bye.